Hello guys, I'm Unstable Voltage. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Mortal Kombat 10 on the PC. Mortal Kombat 10 is the latest game in the Mortal Kombat series. It is developed by Netherrealm Studios, published by Warner Brothers Interactive, and the PC port has been done by High Voltage, no relation. They're also the guys, incidentally, that are doing the ports for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, although those versions aren't available yet. Currently this game is out on PC, Xbox One and PlayStation 4. High Voltage, incidentally, also the guys that did the PC ports for Injustice and Mortal Kombat 9, so you should bear that in mind as we go through this. But as a PC channel, of course, I will be covering the PC version. So just before we actually go into the game itself, a worthy mention is the disaster that was the Steam launch. Now, those problems have mainly been sorted, and we don't know whether or not those problems were caused by Steam themselves or by Netherrealm or Warner Brothers, but those reasons are the majority of the reason why there's a lot of negative and mixed reviews on Steam. I've already done a separate video covering that, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into what actually happened, but basically, the game went live on the Steam store page many hours before the game should have actually gone on sale. That led to a lot of confusion because people were seeing that the game was available, paying their $60 and then finding out that they couldn't actually play the game because it wasn't officially released. And of course, that made people quite salty, who were all going on to the forums and complaining about that. The second issue was Steam decided to try out their new streaming download system. The idea behind that is that the game downloads, instead of having a preload, the game downloads a big chunk of the game, which you can start to play instantly, while the rest of the game is downloaded in the background as you're playing. Now, that idea works for some things, but it was a total disaster in the Mortal Kombat 10 launch. So, players initially got to download a 3GB chunk of the game, and the remaining 27GB of the game was split into 29 DLC packs that downloaded one by one via Steam. Now, the problem was they weren't downloaded in a very useful order. So, with the 3GB initial download, you could go in and play in the practice mode, which is essentially just a tutorial. You could play as Scorpion versus Sub-Zero on a single arena, and that was it. Now, the game started off by trying to download all of the fighters first, but didn't download any of the arenas. So you couldn't even play something as simple as a one-on-one match, because even though it would start to download the fighters, it didn't actually download any of the arenas. So even though they were using this streaming system, you had to download at least half of the game before you could even play 1 versus 1. After that, even when players had managed to download the entirety of the game, there were several issues which were stopping people from accessing the online mode, accessing the story mode or the arcade tower mode, and basically it left people only able to play the tutorials or the single match. You couldn't even get into the credits at that point. Even the credits were locked out, and it took most of the day, so approximately 12 hours for all of those issues to be resolved. There were still a couple of issues. There are still some people that are having issues with certain elements of the game being locked. Not only could you not access the story or the ladder mode, but you couldn't actually play as Sub-Zero or Scorpion, which was very odd considering that Sub-Zero and Scorpion were both in the tutorial, but you couldn't play them in live games. And some people were having trouble with Shinnok being unlocked. He was unlocked for some people and not for others, and the whole thing was quite strange. Also, what caused a little bit more confusion is there is a combat pack available, which is essentially a season pass for DLC. I think it gives you 7 skins and 4 new characters, which is Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. There's also Tanya. There is Tremor and also the Predator. Now, these 4 characters aren't actually finished yet, so they're not available in the game. There is a preliminary release dates for them, but obviously, like most things, they're probably subject to change. But this caused a lot of confusion because, once again, on Steam, it said the combat pack was available. So there was a lot of people buying the combat pack and then being very surprised and very salty that the 4 characters they had just paid for weren't actually playable. So apart from that, most of the issues now with the launch do seem to have been resolved. There are still a few people in Japan and Germany who are having some trouble accessing the game. But aside from that, most of those issues are now dealt with. So what about the game itself? Well, first of all, Let's have a quick look at the options and see what we've got in here. The game does support keyboard and controller. It's designed for an Xbox 360 controller, so all of the button prompts are going to be for the Xbox, although you can use other controllers and you can use fight sticks on there as well, but you are going to see Xbox prompts for them. It does support the negative edge input mode, which is where basically special moves are only executed when you release the button. I generally tend to turn that off because it feels a little bit weird playing with that on. Sometimes it works better than others, but it's not something that I've ever really liked. It's on by default, which is a very, very strange thing. Now, there have been a few bugs reported when people have tried to change the key bindings. One of the first problems is that some people just cannot change their key bindings. It won't let them, and in some cases it causes a crash. And then there are other people having some issues where once you change the key bindings, the game gives you the wrong prompts, because it only gives you the prompts for the default key bindings and not your custom ones. So that is a little bit strange, but there are some custom presets that you can set up and select between, which is very, very useful. So we've got audio options in here. We've got individual audio sliders for pretty much everything in the game, which is quite nice. The video options, obviously you've got a variety of resolution options and refresh rates. Now bear in mind, the game is actually capped to 60 frames per second. So if you've got a 120 or 144 hertz monitor, you're not really going to benefit from it all that much, simply because the game is capped at 60. Not only is the game capped at 60, but many things within the game, such as the X-rays, the fatalities, and the cutscenes, only run in 30 frames per second. So there is a full screen and a windowed mode. Anti-aliasing is basically off, or fast approximate AA, which is quite limited on the AA options there. There is window boxing, of course, to confine the mouse if you want to play in windowed mode, although obviously the game does work absolutely fine with a mouse and keyboard, or just the keyboard, I suppose. If you're actually used to playing fighting games on the keyboard, that's going to be absolutely fine. Pulling off some of the combos and the multi-button special moves can be a little bit tricky, because you do feel like you need to be double-jointed to reach some of the keys. And if you are using a keyboard, it will show the correct keyboard prompts, which is quite nice. But I think most people will find it much easier with a controller or a stick. The game has anisotropic filtering, which goes all the way up to 16. I've got the shadow quality on very high and the texture quality on high, which is as high as they go. Now, I haven't really noticed any performance issues in game. That's not to say that some people haven't. There's quite a few people that have been experiencing frame drops within the game itself. I have from time to time, but some people have definitely been getting it worse than others, so do bear in mind that your mileage may vary. There's bloom effects, depth of field, motion blur, ambient occlusion, all of that is in there as well. Let's get out of there. Video is just literally where you can resize the confines of the screen and change things like the brightness and contrast, which is always very nice. And then you've got the gameplay settings where you can set things like the round time, turn the vibration on and off, not too sure why that's not under controls, change the story difficulty, and certain heads-up display elements and stuff like that. So the options menu is functional. Now, the game does have a launcher, but at the moment nobody can get into the launcher. There is a configuration option within it, but if you try and access the configuration part of the launcher, the game just crashes. So what else do we have in here? Well, let's go ahead and have a look at the mode, shall we, and see what we've got. Obviously, you've got the online. Now, most people who played Mortal Kombat 9 and Injustice will know that the games suffered quite terribly from lag. They do seem to have sorted that out in Mortal Kombat 10. The netcode is a lot better than it used to be. Bearing in mind, if you're playing against someone who lives a good distance away, the chances are that there is going to be a little bit of ping lag, so you might find some moves are particularly difficult to execute. But if you're playing somebody who's quite close by, it doesn't seem too bad. So let's go ahead and have a look at the other modes that are in there. First of all, we'll look at the two-player. These are quite basic. You've got player versus player, which is just a single 1v1 match. Two-player is all local, of course. You've got Test Your Luck, which is a one-on-one match where you basically have a series of random modifiers that can change the game in some interesting and wacky ways. You've also got Custom Combat, which is basically the same thing as Test Your Luck, only you get to manually select the modifiers as opposed to having them randomly thrust upon you. And then you've got Test Your Might, which is where you can go through a series of increasingly difficult challenges. So those are the local two-player options. Now, just before we go into the single player, one other thing that they have added in Mortal Kombat X or Mortal Kombat 10, which is part of the metagame, is this this faction war. So basically, when you start up the game for the first time, you will be given a little bit of information, and you'll be asked to join one of the 5 factions within the game. As you can see, they're all listed there: the Lin Kuei, the White Lotus, the Brotherhood of Shadow, the Black Dragon, and the Special Forces. As you can see, the Lin Kuei seems quite popular, and it's the one that I actually chose to join. And what you've basically got over a period of time, as you can see, the current faction war has 3 days, 16 hours, 28 minutes remaining. And every time you actually complete a fight or do anything within the game, you gain 2 lots of XP. You gain XP towards your own personal character progression, and you also gain XP towards your faction progression. And whichever faction gains the most XP is leading the war. And there are various different things that you can do. So, for example, you get these mini bosses, you get assassin battles, and you get tower battles. And all of these things give you more experience with your particular faction if you do them. And whoever's winning the faction war basically gets access to some extra cosmetic goodies, some additional fatalities, and stuff like that. So it's just a little bit of a meta game to have a little bit of competition where you don't necessarily have to play directly against other players, because there are some people who don't necessarily like playing against other people online, but it does give you some sort of meta game competition that you can do through single player, which is actually quite nice. You do have the ability to customize your combat card. You get to select the background, the icon, and the border, and changing these things actually gives you different rewards in the game, such as my background here, Gravesend, gives me 50 faction XP per faction kill. So you can change all of those things in there. So let's get back out of that. So that is the faction war. You can change your faction at any time, so there's no reason why you can't jump from one faction to the other. And in fact, there are Steam achievements for for getting max level with all the factions. So you've got all of those details down there as well. So now we've looked at that, just one thing extra to talk about is the crypt. If you're used to Mortal Kombat 9, you will recognise the crypt from there. The crypt is basically just an interactive area that you can walk around, where there are a number of little tombstones, and you can open or purchase those tombstones with in-game currency, and they unlock a certain amount of cosmetic things, such as additional skins, concept art, the ability to listen to the game's soundtrack, instructions on how to perform the various different finishing moves. Now, bear in mind that you can always perform all of the finishing moves. It's just that unlocking them in the crypt actually adds them to your moves list so you can see how to do them. Now, one thing that has been quite controversial in Mortal Kombat 10 is the introduction of microtransactions. Now, say microtransactions, some of them are quite large. There's currently one transaction that allows you to unlock the entirety of the crypt for $20. Now, everything in the crypt is pretty much just cosmetic. You don't need it. I still haven't completed everything in the crypt in Mortal Kombat 9, and that game's years old. But if people want to pay $20 to unlock that stuff, well, that's up to them. I mean, it's all stuff that you can unlock in-game. You don't need to pay for it, but if you want to do it just to save yourself the grind, well, that's your own choice. Now, one thing that has been added is the ability to pull off easy fatalities. So for those of you who don't know, a fatality is something that you can execute at the end of a match once you have defeated your opponent, and it's basically a series of input presses on the keyboard or keypad, which essentially allows you to pull off a very flashy execution style move. Now, normally they take a little bit of practice and require you to press several directions on the D-pad and press a couple of buttons to pull them off perfectly, but what they've done now is they've given you the option to have these easy fatalities where you literally just hold down one button and press another, and the fatality is executed. Now, in order to do those, you do need an easy fatality token. You get given a few of them initially just to start with, and you can earn more of them from the crypt. But they've actually added a system that allows people to purchase them. They're 5 for $1, and they are consumed every time you do one of these fatalities. Now, remember, a fatality doesn't actually benefit you in the game. It's really just cosmetic more than anything. And if people want to pay to be able to do them, then that is up to them. But I think it's a pretty stupid way to try and nickel and dime the player, making them pay 20 cents a pop just to be able to pull off a flashy finishing move without having to input the correct controller inputs. But that's just my opinion on that. One other thing people were complaining about is Goro. Goro is considered one of the more popular characters from the Mortal Kombat franchise. He's been in there since the very first game. He was one of the original bosses. And in Mortal Kombat 10, you only actually got Goro if you pre-ordered the game, but I believe even if you haven't pre-ordered, you can still pick him up as DLC for about $5. So again, there's been some people complaining about that, and that's understandable. No one likes when extra characters are put behind paywalls. But let's go into the single player. We've got a number of options here. We've got the story mode. The story mode is actually quite good. Does have a lot of cutscenes. Probably not as strong as the story from Mortal Kombat 9, which I did very much enjoy. There's about 2.5 hours worth of cutscenes in the story alone, but playing through the story and including all the fights, it took me around about 4 hours to complete the entire story. Bear in mind, I only probably lost 3 or 4 matches in the entire story, so it's not going to take you an awful long time to burn through. But for people that like the story mode, it was quite enjoyable. As I said before, the actual cutscenes in the story are all in 30 frames per second, and they are all pre-rendered, which does make it look a little bit jarring sometimes, dropping down from 60 to 30, and obviously they look quite low resolution. I think they're probably running in 720p and just being upscaled to fill the screen. The lighting is definitely different. You can tell the difference between watching a cutscene and watching live action. You've got the towers, which is what you would expect from a normal Mortal Kombat game. So you've got traditional towers, which is where you fight against 10 opponents. You've got the living towers, which are these unique towers that change over time. So it's kind of almost like a daily challenge, and you've got the actual tower challenges where you can actually challenge friends to beat high scores in randomly generated towers. You've also got Test Your Luck, which is back in there again, which is fighting against the AI with the random modifiers, same as the one that you have in the 2-player. And you've also got Single Fight, which is just a basic one-on-one. So let's just pop into Single Fight. So as you can see, there are 25 characters in the current roster. We've got Kung Lao, we've got Jax, we've got Sonya Blade, there's Kenshi, Katana, Scorpion, we've got Sub-Zero, Melina, Takeda, Cassie Cage, Jackie Briggs, there's Kung Jin, and we've got Goro, Quan Chi, Raiden, Devora, Ferrator, Reptile, Kutl Khan, Ermac, Liu Kang, Aaron Black, Johnny Cage, Kano, and Shinnok. So some of those you will remember as Mortal Kombat familiars. There are a few new faces in there, such as Cassie Cage and Jacqueline Briggs, and of course we've also got the likes of Takeda in there as well. So we've got some new people in there. There are a few people who are missing from the roster quite noticeably. There's no Baraka, which is odd because you do get to fight against him in the story mode. There is no Sindel. You also get to fight against her in the story mode. Frost is in the story mode, although you don't actually fight against her. Cabal, Nightwolf, Striker, they're all in the story mode, but you don't actually ever get to fight against any of them. So we may see some more of those characters pop up as DLC in the future. Let's go in and have a look at the gameplay, though. I'm going to go ahead here and pick Sub-Zero. You do get the option to change your skin if you've unlocked any of them. We're just going to go in with the default Sub-Zero skin. Now, what you will notice when you choose a character is you now actually have the choice of 3 variations. Now, you can actually see that they do change the character's skin cosmetically just a little bit. So as you can see there, if I'm Cryomancer Sub-Zero, he's got blue arms. If I go for the Unbreakable Sub-Zero, he's got a frozen mask. And if I go for the Grandmaster Sub-Zero, he has the Link A emblem on his tunic there. Now, some people were saying that this basically took the roster from 25 up to 75 because basically every character's got 3 variations, but I hate to say that the variations don't really change the playstyle all that much. They basically give you a couple of different special moves and maybe a couple of different combos, but the main fighting style is always going to be the same. I'm going to go ahead here and pick Sub-Zero's Cryomancer form. And for our opponent, let's go in and let's do an old grudge match. Let's go in against Scorpion. And as you can see, he's got Ninjutsu, Inferno, and Hellfire. Let's go in for the Ninjutsu one. And we'll go in on medium difficulty. And we will randomly select one of the 13 stages. And we're in the Genocide Chamber. So I've just let the game load in here. because there's something that I do quickly want to talk about that you may have just noticed or maybe even not noticed.
Shirai Ryu, dog. Lin Kuei, scum! Death is more honor than you deserve.
Round 1. Fight!
Now, I'm just going to quickly pause up there. One thing you may have noticed is during that little intro scene, there was a little bit of sort of frame drop, and that is something that you do notice. Now, it's quite noticeable whenever the game transitions from a cutscene into the game and back again. That does seem to cause a few issues. But the one thing I did want to point out, and it's only a very minor thing, but it is something that I've noticed, is when you actually select the characters and select the stage, they don't have the animations anymore where they used to sort of make a little gesture to each other, turn their back and walk away from each other. And that was something that was always showcased in the pre-release Twitch videos for the game. I'm not sure whether that's something that is console only or whether it's just something that's missing from the PC because of a bug. I've asked around, and there are a few people who said that they have actually seen it on the PC, and but the majority of people say that it is not there. Once you pause the game, you do have option to a full moves list for all of your characters' moves. And what you'll notice here, if we look at the special moves, for example, 3 of these special moves are in yellow and all the rest of them are in white. These are the three special moves that are unique to my Cryomancer sort of subclass, if you like, my sort of unique variation. So if I wasn't playing Cryomancer, I wouldn't be able to do these 3 moves, but I'd have different moves depending on what I was playing as. You'll also see that things like the fatalities and brutalities are locked unless you discover them. There's some faction kills down here, of course, because we basically, the Lin Kuei are leading and I'm playing as the Lin Kuei. So we could actually go ahead and do some of these faction kills, or at least we could try to do some of these faction kills. One thing that is very nice, a very useful thing that you can actually do, is if you want to try a particular ability or faction kill, you can go ahead and press a button and actually tag it. That works with all of your special moves as well. And then if we unpause the game, you'll see them up in the top left-hand corner there. The only problem is they don't actually change. If I change sides, they're still giving me the instructions for if I'm left-facing right. So I haven't really had much of a chance to master a lot of the combos in this game yet, and I'm still very, very rusty. I haven't really played Mortal Kombat for a long time, and all I've done in the game is literally play through the story mode. So let's try and get some hits in on this guy and concentrate a little bit on what I'm doing. So try and see if we can freeze the guy. Hit him with my hammer. Frostbolt missed. And we're going to go in and try the X-ray. Now we managed to pull the X-ray off here. Now what's going to happen is the game immediately dives down into 30 frames per second. But it still works out quite nicely. I don't think the frame rate is as important during those sort of animated scenes because you're not having to rely on controller input. So the frame rate isn't as important as it is actually during the fight scenes or the actual fighting itself. Just like in Justice, there's quite a lot of background interactions. So you'll find various different things in the background that you can jump and somersault off. You'll also find things that you can pick up and throw at your opponent in order to do a little bit of damage to them. Let's see if I can actually remember any of Sub-Zero's combos would be a useful thing. So he's just picked something up and threw it at me there. So I can go ahead and try and jump off this wall if I want to. So let us try and do something nasty to him. Not having a lot of luck here. And there's a faction kill.
Sub-Zero wins.
So this is one of the reasons why you actually want to be able to do the sort of faction wars and be at the top, because you get these extra abilities that you can do. And as you can see, you get some profile experience and you get some faction experience, and you also get some of that in-game currency that you can spend within the crypt. Let's just have another go. I'll see if I can actually pull off one of the brutalities. Brutalities have changed a little bit in this game.
I tire of maintaining our innocence. I will relieve you of your burden.
Round 1. Fight.
So the way brutalities work is instead of actually being able to pull them off at the end of the game once your opponent is defeated, you have to meet some special criteria and actually finish your opponent off using them. So for example, if we look at my Snowball Fate brutality, it says that it's usable in all variations. There must be more than 40 seconds remaining on the clock. I must be full screen distance away from my opponent, and my opponent must be frozen, and the final hit must come from an Ice Blast. Now, Ice Blast is just basically the same as my Ice Ball, but it is using using the modifier to make it do more damage. We'll see if we can pull it off. I have been able to pull it off before. It's just actually making sure I can pull off the initialized. Yeah, there's the normalized class. So we need to beat him in the first round anyway. I always screw up the second part of that combo for some reason. Except in that case where I screwed up the first. So as you can see, Scorpion actually used his ability to enhance one of his special attacks there. So his normal chain strike actually grabbed me with a double chain, which meant he did a bit more damage to me. Not going to waste my X-ray there. Probably won't be able to pull the brutality off. I usually screw it up, I'll be quite honest. I've managed it a couple of times. So what we need to do is make sure we beat him on this round. Well, we don't need to beat him on this round, but we do need to make sure that we beat him. That's it. You try and teleport behind me when you can't get in behind me anyway, so the AI is actually not bad. I tend to play on medium. Like I said, though, I do pretty hard. I'm still trying to learn what all the combos and special moves are, so that's what I'm going to have to do to try and finish him off. It's going to be interesting, to say the least, especially doing the enhanced one at the end. Let's see if we can actually... Oh, I think we've actually finished him, which is not what I intended to do, so let's... No, tried to pull off my fatality there and screwed that up as well. So, as you can see, there is a reason why people would possibly want to do the easy fatalities, which would just involve pressing the block button and hitting another button. But the way I see it is, you know, it takes skill, it takes time, it takes practice. If you pull it off, you can pull it off. If you don't, then you don't. I'm going to quit back to the main menu, because what I would like to do is just sort of show you guys the quality of the cutscenes from the story. So I'm going to go into the story, which I have completed. I'm going to go into chapters so that I can try and show you guys... sort of one of the cutscenes from the game. It's going to be very, very difficult to show you this without spoilers. As you can see, you can just go through and watch the movies. There's a little timeline at the bottom that sort of shows you the runtime of the FMV, which, as I said, is just over 2 hours. But we'll see if we can find one that actually goes into a fight. Now, like I said, bear in mind that if you watch this, there may possibly be spoilers. I'm going to select this particular one here, and the reason for that is this is where I noticed the biggest frame drop in the entire single-player campaign. So, if you don't want any spoilers for the story, you might not want to watch this part, but hopefully this will highlight some of the problems with the frame rate issues.
Step aside.
Such power. What are you, Raiden?
I am of truth and light. I protect Earthrealm.
This one cares not for Earthrealm and worships no gods.
So it wasn't too bad this time. You can see it actually transitioned quite nicely from the cutscene into the game itself. Obviously there is a noticeable difference in the quality between the cutscene animation and resolution and lighting compared to the actual game itself. But when I actually did that in the story, the first time as I played it through, the first 10 seconds of this fight were literally a couple of frames per second. It was almost unplayable as Devora hits me with her X-ray. There are some reports of a memory leak in the game. It isn't something that I have actually noticed myself, although I had been playing for quite a long period of time when that issue happened, so it is quite possible that the reason that I suffered the slowdown on this stage during the story was due to that memory leak. But I didn't actually manage to check what the memory usage was at the time. We'll go ahead and see if we can finish this fight. So as you can see, the game actually does look quite nice. The character models are very, very detailed. They're very, very well animated. The particle effects are quite nice. The backgrounds are very good. The animation is relatively fluid. It does look better when you can actually remember or pull off anybody's combos and not make a complete and utter mess of things. Everybody has a good number of special moves, although it does feel like the number of moves has been reduced somewhat, because what they've basically done is split all the characters into these three different flavors where they have different moves for each one. So that is something that's a little bit weird. Can we actually pull off a fatality here? As you can see, we have these easy fatalities where we just basically have to hold down the right trigger, which is block, and hit a button. So we can go ahead and do one of those. So if I hold down the right trigger and hit Y, we should be able to pull off one of those easy fatalities. So, oh, was that only the first round? Oh, it's the story, of course. My bad. I'm actually thinking that I'm in the.
Heed him.
actually thinking that I'm in the main game itself. You can actually skip through the cutscenes, which is quite nice. There is a few seconds at the beginning of a cutscene where you can't skip because it is actually loading. But after that, you can skip the cutscenes. Let's just go in and just have another one-on-one single fight. And we'll see what we'll pull off. We'll just random for our character, see who we get. We actually get Raiden, so that's quite interesting. Let's go ahead and random our opponent as well. I was almost expecting to get Raiden again there. It does seem to happen from time to time. And we will random the background, and we're on Crossroads for the arena. So we'll let them do their little bit of intro speech. Loading times aren't too bad. I'm running this off a hard drive, not an SSD.
Why would I listen to you? I am protector of Earthrealm. It's better off without you.
Round 1.
So as you can see, there was a little bit of frame drop again there at the intro to this. Now, one thing that it is quite nice that they've done is all of the characters have their own individual sort of lines that they deliver to each other in that sort of pre-fight taunting sequence. So that adds quite a bit of flavour to the game. That is something that I actually quite like. Can I remember how to teleport? I'm Thunder God Raiden, not Displacer Raiden, so I'm more about the zaps than anything else. I'm just gonna... He's annoying me now. Ow, that hurts. Can I hit him with my X-ray? Yes, I can. So the X-rays are very well executed. They look really nice. And again, if you've played Injustice, they are quite similar to those. So they do look very, very good. Let's see if we can go ahead and finish him without getting thrown on the floor. A little bit of a cheesy uppercut. Never hurt anybody.
Round 2. Fight.
So overall, what would I say about the game? Yes, it does have a few bugs, and of course, nobody likes bugs, but I've not really experienced many myself, apart from the little bits of slowdown that I have had. So, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, your mileage may vary. Just because some people are having bugs and issues doesn't mean that everybody will. I enjoyed the story mode, I enjoyed the combat. I like what they've done with the faction combat. I think that's a really good idea, adding something that's a little bit more metagame to it. I'm not concentrating at all on what I'm doing here because I'm just too busy talking to actually concentrate on what I'm doing. But yeah, it does have a few problems that definitely need sorting out, but overall I think that the game is good. As far as Mortal Kombat games go, it's enjoyable. If you're a fan of the Mortal Kombat franchise, it might be something you want to check out. But I would advise, go and have a look on things like the forums, like the Steam forums, listen to some of the problems people have been having, and make up your own mind. Decide for yourself whether or not those bugs are something that you could live with if those are bugs that you get. One small point of note, if you actually buy the game on disc, if you go out and buy a physical copy on DVD, you only get the initial 3 gig preload on the DVD, and the other 27 gigabytes is still downloaded from Steam. So you can't, if you have a slow connection and you want to go out and buy a box copy to avoid having to download it, it's not going to work, I'm afraid. Now, what was that? It was block and Y. Let's give it a go. There we go. So 2 button presses, executes an easy fatality.
Raiden wins. Fatality.
But it just doesn't have quite the same amount of satisfaction if you just pull it off by pressing 1 button than it does if you actually manage to pull it off by entering the right combination. But there you go, folks. That is Mortal Kombat 10, available now on PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4.
You blind? I'm back to normal.
I must be sure.